I'm an educator. Sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Claire Ayo, and I'm the educator, one of the educators for Singer. And we have a team helping me in the back. We have Bethany, Sonny, and Amy who are there. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them into the chat, and they will be answering your questions as we move along in this demo today. So the demo, as you heard, is being recorded. So that's good. So don't worry if there's something that you're not too sure of or you'd like to see it again. You can always go back to see specific points of this demo as it's going to be up on the YouTube channel of Michael's probably tomorrow. So let's begin. Um, Today, as Rashmi mentioned, we are going to be talking how to perfect your satin stitch when doing appliques. So appliques are, what are they, first of all? So they're pieces of fabrics that you apply onto a background fabric to create an image, design, or even writing. So it's very versatile. Could be used on garments, could be used on quilts. It could also be used on home decor. So there are many ways you can be using your appliques. And you might think, why do I want to do a satin stitch? Well, when I'm doing satin stitches, it's really to ensure that the project is going to be onto the garment or the quilt for a long time, because it will be able to stand through washing and, just wearing regular moving around. So that's why we use a satin stitch to ensure that the fabric stays on your background fabric. So let's begin by showing you the essentials of what you need when you are making appliques. So first of all, I would say besides the, of course, the fabrics, you will need to use double-sided adhesive. There are many different ones, but because when they're double-sided, you'll notice that it has paper on both sides. So one will be easy to remove. You'll feel the stickiness of the fusible web. So that portion needs to go onto the fabric, and you'll be heat pressing it onto the fabric, and you will keep the second part until you're putting the fusible web onto the background fabric. All right, so that's the first thing that you will need. You will also need, people tend to forget that, so you will need stabilizer, especially to hold down your background fabric and your top. That is really one of the key to ensure a very nice satin stitch. So I like the tearaway stabilizer, but you can also, there's so many different stabilizers, water soluble also, and cutaway. And so I like to point out, if you want to start looking into stabilizers, we do have the Singer multi-pack that has 2 sheets of the tearaway, cutaway, water soluble, so you can test it out and see which ones you like, and then you can purchase those in a bigger format. But at least if you're wondering why is it useful, we'll start with this, and that will give you you'll really understand how it helps you get that satin stitch that is beautiful when you're making your projects. So after that, of course, we mentioned that fusible web or the adhesive sets with heat. So you will need an iron, and I love the Singer Momento mini press. It's very, I just really like it. But one thing that you cannot neglect is actually a pressing sheet. So the pressing sheet is kind of like a Teflon that you put above your applique that you want to heat set, and then put it above, and you put the iron above it, so it avoids having any of the adhesive to get onto your iron, the sole plate. All right, so those are the first things that you need for to understand the appliques, the essential. And then of course, for the sewing machine, you first of all, you'll need scissors to cut out the design, or I've used for most of the stuff that I've already pre-cut here, I use the Memento cutting machine that we have also from Singer. And then you'll need the universal needles on your sewing machine. Threads, you can go with 50 weight to 30 weight thread. I'm going to have samples to show you how that affects the density of your satin stitch too. So they do play an important part in your satin stitch. And you will need a special foot. The satin stitch foot is one of them on the sewing machine. So I'm going to switch over to look at the sewing machine to show you what we need on it. And I'm actually featuring the heavy duty 4452 to demonstrate today how to perfect your satin stitch. So here we go. All right, so as mentioned, I have the heavy duty 4452 for this project, and I actually added an extension table. So the extension table is very useful when quilting and also when you're doing satin stitch, because you have more space to move around. Other things that I want to show on the machine, for the 4452, it has the a set dial with several stitches. For today, to do the satin stitch, you will be using the zigzag stitch. So right now it's set for straight stitch, so we simply move the knob to go to the zigzag. The second thing I want to show you is the length dial. So when we're doing a straight stitch, usually we have the length of our stitch between 2 and 3. When you're doing a regular zigzag, usually it's a 3, but when we're talking satin stitch, we actually are lowering the length of our stitch length. So I like to bring it all the way down to 0.5, and I'll be showing you the different examples to really have a good visual on that in just a little bit. But I wanted to work my way up here to show that we also need to have the stitch width selector, and which is on the sewing machine. So the stitch width, usually when we are doing a straight stitch, the width is at 0, and because a satin stitch, you move from left to right, you can increase the width, and this machine goes all the way up to 6 millimeter. For when I'm doing a satin stitch, I like to have it around 3 and 4, but I can't say it's a general rule because it really depends on the project that I'm doing. So again, nothing is set in stone. I do encourage you to try things out before you make your project, test it to see what stitch length is really nice. Because if, I'm going probably too far, but if you have a solid color, you might want to have it a little bit thinner at 3 millimeters. But if you have a variegated thread and you want to show off all those wonderful colors, then maybe you want to have it at 4 or 5 millimeters. So there's nothing set. It depends on the project that you're doing. And I want to show you another dial that's on the 4452 that I really enjoy, especially for making on my satin stitch. So it's the needle position. You can position your needle at the left edge, you can position it in the middle, or you can position it to the right. All right, you'll see it at close up in just a little bit, but when we're sewing regular straight stitch, the needle position is going to be in the middle, and that's fine. But when you're doing a satin stitch, you like to make sure that your satin stitch is at the edge of your applique. So I really enjoy the needle position to be able to put it on the right-hand side, to be able to get that perfect positioning when I'm doing the satin stitch around my applique. So that's something that I really like. And of course, we do have the dial for the tension. Usually when we sew, we have the tension around 4, but when you are making a satin stitch, again, we want to make sure that we have a beautiful satin stitch. So we don't want the bobbin thread to show up. So in case if you're leaving it at 4 and you do not see your bobbin thread, then that's fine. You can leave it at 4. But if it's giving you a hard time, don't hesitate to lower it to 3, 2, again, you need to test it, but that's how you will obtain that nice satin stitch look, by playing with your tension dial. Is there any questions so far? So I guess I will continue. Now the fun can start. So now that I've explained the basic features of the sewing machine, we're going to just get a little bit closer so you can see what I'm doing. And so let's go here. Now, as I mentioned, you will be using universal needles. I have in the box here the size 90. I will use 90 when I'm using a 30 weight or a 40 weight thread. If I'm using a 50 weight, I can stay with the 80 size needle. Right now, I have a 50 weight white thread to be testing to make sure that you can see what I'm doing. So I've kept the 80 universal. And now I want to remove the general purpose foot that's on the sewing machine. So you simply have to press in the back of the foot to have to disengage the foot. So this is what you usually have on your sewing machine. And if you've tried to make a satin stitch using this foot and have had a hard time, absolutely normal. It's not meant to do a satin stitch. Why? Because when you look into the back, there's just a little groove here, but you see the plate is really flat, so it lays low onto your sewing machine, which is what you want when you're doing a straight stitch. But when you're doing a satin stitch, you have a lot of thread on the top, and so you do need a groove all the way through the plate so that your satin stitch will move easily. And so if you've had that feeling where your satin stitch jams under the foot and you're creating a mountain, so that's what happened with that foot, and it will not happen with the satin stitch. Now, I believe we'll have it in the comment links to go and see those foot showing up in the comment section if you want to take a look at them. But I want to show you my favorite. My favorite when I'm doing a satin stitch is actually this one. So that is the clear open toe foot. That is perfect for satin stitch and other decorative sewing. So I use the clear one. It's not easy to show on camera, but the reason why I like to use the clear one is that you can see your project underneath, and so you always know where you're going and what's happening. So it's always, when I can opt for a clear foot, I always do. So if you look into the back, so you can't see because it's clear, but you do have a whole groove here. Your satin stitch will be moving through that foot without any problems. And on the front here, so you do have, it's completely open, so it does allow you to see what you're doing and positioning your applique exactly where you need to. So I'm going to set the pressure foot on. Okay, so it's now onto the machine. And I'm going to start with a simple piece of fabric. My stabilizer is underneath, and I'm going to make a test. And we should always test before you start sewing a project. So let me just, I apologize, I'm going to move the camera so that you can have a better look. And here we go. So you can now see just a little bit better what's happening, because I want to make sure. Sorry for all this. All right. There we go. So I like to bring the pressing foot down and I'm just showing you how to do the zigzag stitch. That's why there's no applique, totally normal, don't worry. I just want to start, so I always do one stitch manually to make sure that everything's fine, and then I'm gonna start. And as I'm starting, it's one last thing I want to talk about that I didn't deep. You need to control another trick to really have a nice satin stitch. You need to control the speed at which you're making the project. So you have to with the heavy duty 4452, the pedal is your speed control. So do go gently on the pedal so that because you want to always see stitch by stitch how the satin stitch is progressing on your project. So you cannot go, pedal to the floor and really run fast. You do need to take your time making the applique. So I am going slowly, and you see here it's actually doing a nice. Let me just zoom in just a little bit more. So it is making a nice satin stitch, but I want to show, so I'm going to turn the knob a little at 3. And so you will see, let me just bring this down, turn it around. So you see, this is the length, stitch length at 3 and stitch length at 0.5. So you do need to bring that stitch length as close as possible to 0 to get that satin stitch effect. And right now my stitch width is at 3. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to bring the stitch length back down to 0.5, and I'm going to increase the width at 5. And so you can see again, of course, I shouldn't have pulled on it, but I wanted you to be able to see how it varies, how wider that satin stitch is. And one thing I also want to mention, so when you are doing the satin stitch, I recommend that you don't push or hold the fabric. You really need to let the fabric go at the speed that the feed dogs are sending it through so that it won't skip a section. I'm going to purposely do that so you can see what I mean. So if I'm sewing, doing the applique stitch, I'm not really holding the fabric, so it is following. If I'm holding it back, that's when, if I'm holding it, it's going to start creating that mountain, and you don't want that mountain because that's how it gets jammed. On the opposite, sometimes we tend to want to push it to go faster, but if you push to go faster, then your satin stitch won't look as nice as you see here. So this, I pushed my fabric through, so I don't have a nice satin stitch. Here is letting it go on its own, and that's when I was holding it back. So it does make a thicker, fuller, more dense satin stitch, but it is dangerous because there's so much groove that we have under the stitch plate. So that's where you tend to get those oops happening. So now that I've shown it on the machine, I'm just going to I'm going to show you here, and I think I'm going to zoom out so you can see it. There. So this is a sample that I've made, and I strongly suggest that you guys do this back home so that it's kind of a reminder of how the satin stitch works. So on the top here, I've made 3 different test runs to see what does my satin stitch look like depending on the stitch length. So this is the stitch length at 2, 1, 0. You see how there's nothing happening because it's just staying in place. So you do not want it at 0. And then we have it at 0.5, which is what I recommend. And so here now on the left, you have the stitch width. So moving from 0, which is basically your straight stitch, all the way up to 6 millimeter to see, you know, you have a zigzag stitch here at stitch length 2, and then it turns into a satin stitch when you are at 0.5. Is everything, does anyone have any questions so far? Great.
So Claire,
yes.
There is one question.
It's from Kathy. She said, if the fabric is still showing through after the first pass, so you go around or you do your satin stitch, is it preferable to run over it again, or do you have another suggestion for that?
That is a very good question. So there's multiple ways that you can look at that. But if, let's say, because some people do tend to find that it's still not the density that I want. The first thing I'm going to start by saying is that if you have a 50 weight thread, and maybe I'm going to show you now my sample here, because maybe just going with a thicker thread will help that situation. So I'm going to put this here, and sorry, I'm going to be moving the camera down. All right. So if you look at the petals on this project, I have different thread counts. So this one here is I'm trying to so this one is a 50 weight thread, and it's and compared to this one which is a 40 weight thread. Let me move it over here. And this one is a 30 weight thread. Do you guys see it well?
Yep,
okay,
we're good.
Perfect. So you'll see that this one doesn't look as full as the 40 weight, and the 30 weight, this one really does look, it completely changes the design. So my first thing would be, if someone says, I don't find the density nice, and you're at the lowest possible on your machine, I would start by finding a thread that is thicker. If that still doesn't work, then yes, I would suggest going twice, but that's another trick. So if you're deciding in this case that you're going to keep on using that 50 weight thread, you're going to go once at a stitch length, it's a stitch width of 2, and then go back again the second time around with a stitch width of 2.5. So that's just the one thing I'm going to recommend. If you want to go twice, don't go with the same width. The first width should be just a little bit smaller than the final width that you want. Okay? So having said that, I'm going to move the camera back up to the sewing machine, and I'm going to, okay, I'm going to now show a few things to help you perfect with corners and round edges and points. And so let's begin. What I do, and I always recommend when people ask me, I say always start, like I said, you never start with your project. You do. I always have. Let me zoom out. So I always have these handy by my sewing machine before starting an applique, because I like to test it out with a square and a circle. I recalibrate. I guess it's for me to, so that my hands and my brain remembers the motion before getting into the specific project that I'm doing. So I always have these close by, so that I can start learning the process all over again, because every time you do make an applique, it's like doing it for the first time, at least for me. So I have the needle positioning on the right hand side. And so the first thing I'm going to do is manually, because now I can see, oh, let me zoom back in. Sorry, guys. So my needle is on the left side. So I just pull it back down. So now I know that it's I'm at the right width that I want, and it's on the right hand side, so I can position it exactly where I want on the side of my applique. So I'm gonna zoom in one more, because this is where the fun begins. When we're doing, so as I mentioned before, we're doing a satin stitch to really prevent the fabric from fraying, or to make sure that the applique stays on that background fabric as long as possible and endures multiple washing and whatever is thrown at them. So I'm going to make sure that my satin stitch is as much as possible on the applique fabric and not in between the background and the applique. So I'm going to take that the needle, now that it is on the right hand side, I'm going to make sure that it's just right outside my move this here. Okay. So the needle is literally just outside of my applique. All right, so that's the first positioning that I want to happen. And I will bring the needle down, bring it back up, and I'm going to grab my background thread, bring everything to the back, and I am ready to start. Of course, I moved everything. It's not as simple as you think when you're doing this with the camera in front of the design. So I moved, let me just reposition it there. So that's how I start my applique. So it's really as simple as just letting it go slowly, not pushing it, not moving it. I'm going to go a little bit faster. I should have started closer to the edge because I want to get to that corner and show you what to do. So here I go. So when you get to a corner, it's like playing chess. You always have to think ahead 2 or 3 times. So the trick is that you have to remember where your needle is going to the next time. Because if you're doing a corner, you want to always make sure that your needle, you finish on the right hand side before pivoting. Okay, so I'm going to continue my satin stitch and stop when the needle is on the right and at the edge of my design. Here we go. So this is exactly where I want to be before pivoting. Why? Because once I turn around and I pivot, my needle is going to go to the left side. And so if my needle would have been on the left side at that corner, it would be going to the right, so which is not what we want. So now you always have to remember when you are making an applique, and in this case, the needle, before making any adjustment, any changes in where you're heading, you need to make sure the needle is on the right hand side. So let's do this here and we continue. And I'm going to show you because I've prepared it in advance, especially for this. So this is what happens. So let me show you here. Like,
Claire, maybe if you zoom out just one,
Yeah.
that might help us. Yeah, there, perfect.
Okay, thank you. So so here was an example of what I was mentioning. If you finish with the needle on the left-hand side and you pivot, you get a corner that is not what you need, and the applique, the satin stitch now is off of your fabric. So that's why it's important to finish with the needle position to the right, and then begin your applique again, your satin stitch again, to move down here. Now, this section here, you're going over a satin stitch that you've already done. So it could be tempting, because you're afraid to be going through all those stitches. You're going to be wanting to push the fabric through, but if you do that, you're not going to have a nice and even satin stitch. So you have to be careful there to not push, to give it a little push to go over that satin stitch, but not too much of a push that it really it jumps and you don't have a nice finish. So that's the first thing to explain how to do corners. Now, what you could also do, but it demands a little bit of practice, I would have to say, is that you could actually try to make to play with the width of your fabric, and that's the beauty of it. I'm actually going to go back. Sorry, guys. I want to go back to that needle position and why I love it so much on that on this sewing machine. So the fact that bring this over here. So remember when I mentioned that the sewing machine had 3 needle positioning? It can be set to the left, to the middle, or to the right. So I actually played with the stitch width of when doing the satin stitch. And so this is with position to the left. So you can play with the stitch width. That's a tough, can't say that too many times. And if you look here on the, you can also, you can change it, and I guess it's tapering. You can do it in all the different position, but it's very interesting when you're doing it. If you want to just press the dial, your width dial from, let's say it's at 4, and you gently bring it back down to 0. So it becomes a little line, and then you can pivot and bring it back up to 4. And so that will allow you to be able to make a nice, to move from one to the other. You see, if you're starting here and tapering down, then you can start at a 4 and start here. So you have less of a bump on your corners. You do get nicer, smoother corners. And if you want to practice it enough, you can also try to, not try, but you can make mitered corners using your stitch width, narrowing it down and then bringing it back up. So there is a lot of fun that can be done with those corners. But the easiest is really to make sure that you end with your needle position on the right, pivot, and then go back and do the satin stitch on the next side. So that's the first trick that I wanted to show you guys. So again, having this square and circle really can help you, that can help you make it easy. So doing this before making your project will help you have a better practice and have a very nice sound finish when you're making your project. So I'm going to go away from the square. Just gonna cut my thread. And I'm going to go to the next shape, which is the circle. So now the circle is I would say it's probably the toughest one to do, surprisingly enough, because you would think that it would be the easiest one. But you really have to make sure that when you're, because you're always changing the angle. So when you are making your satin stitch, it's really important that you change your angle very smoothly. So again, I'm on the left, I'm gonna go back up because I want to start on the right, make sure that I'm positioned correctly. that's what I want to be. And so when ideally, you'll be wanting to make quick adjustment like every 3 to 4 stitches, and just move your fabric around slowly but surely. All right. The things that it's easier to explain the things you don't want to do. For example, now my needle is on the left-hand side. You do not want to adjust an angle when the needle is on the left-hand side. Again, it's like the same principle as the square. You want to make sure that you are changing angle when the needle is on the right-hand side. Now you can change it. Again, on the right hand, you can change the angle. So that will give you a smooth edge. Every time that you change the angle when the needle is on the left hand, you'll get a dent. You won't have a nice finish. And I did that purposely so that you guys can see it. With this sample right here, you see how everything, sorry. See how the round shape is kind of like always zigzaggy? That happens for 2 reasons. The speed at which you are doing your circle, and the fact that you are changing the angle when your needle is on the left-hand side. So that's I want to show. Let me zoom out again. Here. Actually, it's zooming in, but it looks better. So if you see right here, you see how you have this edge, this part here, that happened because the change happened when the needle was on the inside. So it's not following along. You don't have that nice edge like you see right here. This is what you want to obtain, this smooth, this nice straight line. It can be all crooked on the inside of the pattern because it's pink on pink. No one's going to see it there. But on this side, you really have to make sure when you're pivoting that your needle is on the right-hand side, because you want this line to remain straight all the time. So I hope I've explained, I hope. Well, I'm just going to say, does anyone have any questions with either the square or the circle, how to maneuver the satin stitch through those shapes?
It's Sonny,
I personally have a question for you.
Yes.
As you were turning your angle, right? So you were turning your, on your circle, you didn't raise the presser foot. Do you think that's something you should or shouldn't do? Do you need to do that? I tend to, but I don't know if there's a reason, yes or no.
You know what? It depends on the thickness of your fabric, because, and it depends because you're not doing a big, you do not want to do a big pivot. So when it's a slight pivot, I did raise it for the square, but for this one, I would tend not to. Let me just see here. Yeah, it should be a smooth transition because you're literally like moving it every 2 or 3. So it's a gentle move, you see?
Yep.
So, but it may, perhaps if I were, let me just put it, I have to stop the needle on the right-hand side. So if I were doing an applique using a thicker fabric, I would probably definitely have to raise the foot. But this is very, I do not see, I don't have a concern with that one so far. I don't, yeah.
Thank you. No, that's great. Bethany, did you see any other questions that I may have missed?
No, and I can't remember if you called this out, Claire, earlier or not, but just one of the questions that I get every time I teach applique is how much of the stitch is on the fabric that is the applique versus the background fabric?
Yeah.
Do I split the difference? Do I do most of the stitch on the applique, and why?
Okay, So that's a very good question. I'm coming from a quilter's point of view, so it might be different for others. Let me just see if I can bring it to the, you see how my needle is like red right on the outer edge of that fabric? You want as much of that satin stitch to be here. Why? Because it's, again, I'm talking as a quilter. We're working with 100% cotton fabrics, especially if it's a project that's going to be washed. The fabric will fray. So you want as much as possible under there, because even if it does fray, it won't come out. Your applique won't come out. I'm a very lazy quilter, and I have been known to make, I made heart-shaped square blocks for my kids when they were younger, and I did not want to make a satin stitch. I made embroidery stitch or a very loose satin stitch. And when the fabric would fray, because it would fray farther than that decorative stitch I would use. And so it would, and I'm talking not like after one wash, it was several, several, I would say they would go to daycare. So the machine, the quilt was washed on a weekly basis. And after 2 years, you can see some pieces of fabric that the fabric would get fray and move out of the satin stitch. And because it went through the dryer, also that all of the heating, so the applique would kind of start peeling off. So you don't want that to happen. So that's why you want as much as possible of the satin stitch onto your fabric. And I was mentioning you can go to a 6mm. So if you know that it is a project that you are going to be washing and putting in the dryer, you might want to use that 6mm width, because you don't want to have the fabric starting to fray and peel off. So again, I see in the notes, Sani, yes, the stitch width is a personal choice. If I'm making a wall hanging, I'm going to probably use 2 or 3mm, but if it's something that's going to be washed, I'm going to go with 4 to 6mm, because I want to make sure, it's always that 1/8 of the fabric in a quilt cotton that's going to fray. So as long as you are over that your satin stitch is going over that 1/8 area, that applique is secure.
Claire, I have a question.
Yeah.
That other people, because I know you're using a woven cotton fabric onto a woven cotton fabric, but you can applique other types of fabric, right? So if I wanted to attach a woven applique to, let's say, a knit shirt or vice versa, I can do that, right?
Absolutely. And that I I didn't know how, because I only have an hour. I didn't want to go into too much detail, but absolutely, you do have fusible web that is intended for stretchy fabrics also. So you just have to make sure that you're using the right double-sided adhesive for those, and you can definitely use them. I'm talking, I'm using 100% cotton thread, because I'm using 100% cotton fabric. But then again, you can use polyester threads for other different materials. So yes, if you're doing, you can do an applique on a hoodie or a sweatshirt or a t-shirt, but just make sure that you're using the right medium to do that interfacing. Not the interfacing, sorry, to make sure that the adhesive that you're going to put between the two fabrics. Is that all right? All right, so I'm going to move along. I have no one, I think that if no one answered the question, everything's good. I want to show
Everything's good. Sorry, I couldn't hit the unmute fast enough. But yes, thank you for answering that.
I want to show one last thing, and I'm going to use a pencil, because a lot of people we'll use like pointy, like for example, if you're making a heart, you're gonna have to do an applique and get to that pointy area. So I drew it in. So what do we do in this case? And so that's, I'm gonna bring this, I mean, zoom out, sorry. All right, so that's when I'm gonna bring this back again. I mentioned that you can go from, you can play with your stitch width as you're doing your satin stitch. And this is what I recommend to do here, because you could technically, again, keep that 4 millimeter, go down here and then pivot and go back up, but you won't have that pointy look. So if you do want to have that pointy effect, I'm going to try to do it here. So I'm at I'm making a 3 millimeter. Oh, so it's happening live. I'm so glad because I did it, but I did not explain what I was doing. So you just notice I was trying to make that satin stitch and nothing was happening. So my trick when every time I'm starting, and I don't want to unthread, let me just grab the thread here. Oh, no, I have unthreaded. Things I don't want to happen, they happen always live, and I have like 5 minutes left of the class. Use the auto threader, which is another great feature of the sewing machine. So see, automatic needle threader right here. So here's the other thing I do every time I'm doing a satin stitch. I'm gonna go and grab that bobbin thread, because I'm sure that if I'm holding both of these threads together, I'm going to get my satin stitch running from the get-go. Okay, sorry, my hands were right in front, you didn't see a thing, sorry. So that's my trick. Always hold the two pieces of the bobbin thread and the top thread. I'm holding them in the back, keeping the tension to make sure that I have a nice satin stitch right from the beginning. So I'm gonna work my way down to the bottom. And as I'm nearing the bottom, I'm gonna start reducing very slowly to 0. So I'm gonna put my needle back down. Then I raise the foot because it's a big angle to turn. And I'm going to go to the next. Now I kind of went off the line because I'm not facing my sewing machine directly. Sorry. So I'm going to go from there and just going to go back down here. So working my way back up through the next line that's happening, and then I'm going to start increasing my stitch width to get back to the 3, but very slowly, because you want it to have a smooth transition back to 3 millimeter. Bring this back up. So you see how you've made a pointed edge with that narrowing the width. So again, oops, sorry, this goes here. So again, if you're making a wall hanging, something that's not going to be washed, you can definitely play with the tapering. But if you are making a quilt that's going to be washed and dried, then I might not be doing that. I would probably keep that wider width. But I just wanted to show you it's possible to get a satin stitch to be reduced to 1 and then go back up to 3, so that you get that pointy edge for that perfect look. So I think I've run through everything that I wanted to show, and so I'm going to open the floor to questions if anyone has any other questions.
Claire, will you change your camera back so we can see you again?
I was just about to do that.
Ah, cool. Sorry. We miss seeing you.
There, I'm back.
Claire, I just wanted to say I love all the tips that you gave. And that last tip of getting to that point reminds me of a time that I used a satin stitch as a decorative stitch. And I used it to make, I was sewing up a bag that looked like a strawberry, and I wanted it to have seeds on the front. And I used the different widths of the satin stitch to make those little seed shapes. So I just wanted to share that to say that you can use the satin stitch even as a decorative stitch in some fun ways as well. So hopefully that inspires some of y'all to kind of think outside the box when using a satin stitch.
Absolutely, yes. Oh, someone asked, I think I see a question to do the inside point. You're right. So, well, the inside point of a heart is kind of the same thing as the point at the bottom of the heart because it's inward. So except that when you're doing the bottom of the heart, you really want to make sure that your needle is on the outside going in, because that's the line you want to protect to make sure that it keeps on being straight. And well, actually it is the same thing on the top of the heart. You still want it to make sure that that needle, when you are moving or repositioning, that it's on the, still on the, on that side, to make sure that you have that nice smooth line.
We have a question from Bridget. She said, is satin stitch the only one used for applique?
Well, no, absolutely not. I mentioned earlier, the satin stitches, if you do want to make an applique that will be washable, then the satin stitch is really the one that will protect all of your fabric that you've attached. If you're doing a decorative stitch, you can go and you can do that buttonhole stitch. You can use a decorative stitch. You can use whichever stitch you want. And I think you can also, like, if it's also a decorative item that you're putting on the wall, sometimes you can just do a raw edge. You don't need to do that satin stitch, but to be able to hold it down to make sure that it's going to stand the test of time, you can definitely put any kind of decorative stitch that you want on top. But if you want it to be washed and put in the dryer, then the satin stitch is strongly recommended.
I have to agree with you there because I love just the border, the outline that a satin stitch makes around your applique. But I've made some fun ornaments and little crafty projects where you want to see like the fringe of the fabric. And so doing a looser zigzag or some of those other kind of blanket stitches can be really fun. Or even just a straight stitch can be really fun to just tack it down and still get a different aesthetic look of your project. So
yeah.
Claire,
So yeah,
yeah, I was just gonna say, if you don't
Have anything, everybody's thanking you, so that's great.
yes,
Any other like final tips and hints?
absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone. And if ever you have more questions, if you want to go at the, I think Bethany might be sending in the sharing it with the chat section that there's a list of masterclass from Singer that is available at Michael's. And there are links to past applique projects. So you can always go and see the applique beach towel, the spooky applique t-shirt, if you're wanting to do garments. And so those are all great classes and projects that you can take a look at to continue to perfect your applique. And if you want to come back next week, we're going to have Karen Charles that will be having demonstrate sewing with difficult fabrics. So that's also a very fun class, very lots of information that, and Karen is just going to be super at it.
Thanks, Claire. We appreciate it.
And I think, Rashmi, unless you have something else.
No, we're good. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.